welcome to the latest episode of the Executive Roast. I'm your host, Emma Bagley, also founder of Zeal Agency, an Amazon marketing and management company based in the UK. So today I'm interviewing David Ezrel, who's the founder of Epsilon, safety and quality compliance consultant, expert in helping e-commerce brands, in particular those selling on Amazon. So David, would you like to more formally introduce yourself and the company and how you help brands in this space?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm David Ezrel, and I help a lot of brands, particularly e-commerce brands, deal with not only the safety compliance that the government imposes on them, but also that the e-commerce sites, particularly Amazon, impose on you. I've had a lot of customers who ask me if I know Amazon compliance, and the truth is that for the most part, Amazon is only trying to require what the government requires. They don't always get it right. Occasionally, they have their own intentional strictnesses over the government, but often they're unintentional. And that makes it more complicated because you don't know what they want. Most of those issues, they come to me trying to figure out what is it that Amazon really wants from them. Companies coming from out of the country also often have a lot of trouble just figuring out the landscape of compliance in the United States, or coming from the United States to Europe. It's different from one country to the other often.
So David, do you help brands from all over the world sell on any kind of marketplace, or are you expert in UK, US? If you can just explain.
I help companies from anywhere sell anywhere. Amazon is a particular issue for a lot of companies just because the way they do compliance. I don't know why they do it that way, but they do it that way. Most of the other e-commerce sites, their regulations more closely match what the government's regulations are that they're trying to meet. And for some reason, Amazon doesn't do it quite like that. But I can help anybody. I can help you with the regulations anywhere. Just Amazon is an additional skill.
Amazon is just that complex beast, isn't it? It has its own rules that often are not written down. We're playing a game. We don't quite know the rules. And thank you so much for giving your time. A real kind of guru, expert in this area. So thank you. To our first question, in straightforward terms, what is compliance and what kinds of responsibilities do brands actually have when launching in the US? Or EU?
A lot of different brands have different viewpoints. And what many brands think the answer to that question is that the factory said they have it taken care of. And you should never rely on your factory. Even if they did take care of it, you should make sure yourself it's really all there. What it means is going to depend on the product. A simpler product, a toy, a children's product, it needs certain kinds of testing, which is going to be different in each country. And if you have that testing and it passed, there's some labeling requirements, so that's usually included in the testing. If you pass the testing, you pass the labeling. That's what you need. You're going to need to make sure that they tested the right stuff to the right requirements, that it's current, that it really passed. A lot of factories will do the testing and they'll leave out things. Sometimes it's obvious why they left it out because it's a problem. Sometimes they just left it out because some things were undetermined, like they sell the same thing to 5 different places. So you need to identify who the distributor is and the labeling. They don't know. So that won't be in the testing. It needs to be in the testing. It's a minor thing that means you're not passing, even on a label, is a very serious problem if the right people notice that, or maybe from your viewpoint, if the wrong people notice that. If it's electronics, there's more sophisticated testing that's needed. It's usually referred to as UL, but UL is a private company who wrote a lot of the original regulations, but there's others who do the same thing, ETL, and there's a whole list of them. But UL and ETL are the most famous of them. Now, if you sell in certain stores for in-store applications, will require UL certification, which is more than testing. That requires factory quarterly inspections, and they check out all your incoming parts and supplies, and they have to be approved. It's much more involved because the suppliers have to be approved, the components have to be approved, everything. And then they check every quarter. That's to make sure you're still buying all the same stuff and making it the same way. That's usually only required. It's not required on a toy, on a regular toy, or on clothing. If you have cosmetics, we're in the infancy of cosmetic regulation. Several years ago, somebody in the cosmetics business realized that we put it all over our skin. It goes into our skin, into our bodies, and no one ever thought about what's in it and what it does to us. It turns out a lot of horrible stuff was in cosmetics that makes our skin age early and get sick and all kinds of things. Right now in the United States, we have the basic basic regulations, because when the government does something, it takes a long time. Eventually, it'll become more. Right now, you need to register your factory and your product so that the government can pick up a product in a store and be able to trace it back to who made it. So if there's a problem, and the only problems would be if someone complained about it. But if there's a problem, someone got a horrible rash or got deathly ill, at least they know who did it. And you don't want to be that person, but you have to register. That's called MOCRA. Eventually, they're going to add on to it. There's going to be specific testing required to make sure certain things aren't there. There's going to be a quality system required for the factory that makes it to make sure it's consistent, similar to how UL certifies things. But we're not there yet. And then there's label requirements, what's written on your label, what's in the ingredients. If you put it in on purpose, there are rules about what are certain things can't be there. You want to make sure those are okay. Food and dietary supplements have more requirements. Medicine, medical devices have more requirements. It becomes bigger and bigger. The more medical devices you understand, it's supposed to cure something. But after you registered, sometimes it needs approvals if it's something new. You can't just test it at the end. That ain't going to work. A lot of things work until they don't, until somebody notices. And there are companies who do that and they think they're in a great position. But when it doesn't work very badly. And their brands can be shut down depending on how serious it is. Their stuff can be confiscated. There can be recalls. Like all kinds of horrible things can happen. But you want to be ready for it. You want to do it right the first time so that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
So if a brand was seriously considering it, they think that everything's fully compliant in the US and they want to launch in the UK on Amazon, as an example, would they come to you and you navigate that water with them so they sure they're compliant with all of the UK regulations?
Yeah, and something to keep in mind, whenever you've met regulations in one country and you want to meet in a different country, you're in a better position because you probably have a product that will meet, but the rules are different everywhere. They're not always evenly different. They're not always the same direction different. Typically, people think that Europe is stricter on a lot of things. In the United States, there's a lot of talk now about food dyes and things like that, food additives, and the rules are a lot looser in the United States. So that doesn't mean they always are. Recently, I've had people bringing in stuff from Canada, and it's sold commonly in Canada, and it comes to the United States. They didn't ask me in advance. They asked me after customs seized all their stuff, and people are calling the FDA. In this case, it was CPSC was contacted them about packaging because it's hazardous medicine. And I was like, this is not medicine. This is just whatever. It's like some kind of decongestant or something like that. And that's where ingredient review comes in. But in this case, it has an ingredient. It's not that's considered medicine in the United States. That just happened to be that one product. And he had no idea. He wasn't trying to break rules. He didn't check in advance. And there are rules issues. And we navigated it for him, but it would have been a lot easier to do it in advance. Sometimes we've had things where it's just an overlap. The overlap is similar, but it's just a different regulation. And yeah, if you meet one, you're more likely to meet the other. You just have to know. You have to actually look into it and work it out.
If people are wanting to reach out, just listening so far into this podcast, how do people learn more about you and how do they get in contact with you, David?
I have a website, epsilonsafety.com, or you can go to my LinkedIn profile page, David Esral, Esral. There is only one. That's what's nice about a very uncommon name. So there aren't multiple David Esrals to sort through to figure out which one is me. And there's contact info, but solutions at Epsilon Safety. And my cell phone number is also on my LinkedIn and on the website. You could call either number and contact me that way. Or you could DM me on LinkedIn.
So the next question then really, you may have already touched on this, but I think there might be a bigger example. Can you walk us through a real example of a brand that ran into some serious issues with customs or Amazon, and what did it take to resolve it?
I have a lot of examples, unfortunately, for them. I had a customer in the United States. This is a toy. Toys are relatively easy, less regulation. It was tested and it passed. The age grade was 18 months plus, year and a half. So age grades, when I was growing, before I got into this, if you have a really smart kid, I remember parents would be proud. My kid's only 2, but he plays with toys that are 4 plus, and which is a good thing. Your kid's smart, but what you don't realize is the age affects the safety requirements. A 2-year-old will put things in their mouth without thinking about it. A 3-year-old, less likely to. If the parents are aware, watch out. So they'll keep a sort of an eye on him. In the United States, if you have a small part, which is a choking hazard, which means it would fit right down their throat, if it's for up to age 3, you can't sell it at all. It's just fail. 3 to 6, it has a small parts warning, which means the parents are going to need to watch it. Now, that's a very straightforward one. There are other things. We do a test called use and abuse, which means normal use. If you just play with it how you're supposed to, will it break into small parts or sharp points, things like that? Let's say it falls off a high chair or falls off a table, that's abuse. It's not how you're supposed to use it, but those things happen. Let's say 2 kids are having a tug of war and pulling on it, fighting over the toy. So is it going to break then? So that's abuse testing. So it's commonly known as use and abuse. The regulations for 12 months plus, and 18 months plus for use and abuse or for abuse are different. So this company had tested everything for 18 plus and it passed. Now, 18 months went by and they didn't test it. They're like, no one's asking. Never say that. This is what they said. No one's asking. So what I need to waste $500 or $700 or whatever it was on testing? It's always going to depend on where you test it and how complicated the toy is, what it really costs. But I think in his case, it was about $500 or $700. Something changed in the production. And that's why you have to test annually, because things change. They get a new supplier or they change the manufacturing a little bit. They run it a little hotter, a little colder. It doesn't necessarily work as well. The design changes slightly, gets a little thinner, a little fatter. Suddenly, it didn't pass use and abuse, but it would have passed for 18 months plus because the abuse is done differently. If they had just put 18 months plus, they would have been fine. Or if they had fixed the problem, they would have been fine. If they noticed the change, they could have gone back and figured out what changed in the design and the material and whatever. But that didn't happen. They saved their $500. The CPSC bought their product, probably bought 6 of them, and they ran their own tests on them and they failed. Then they wanted to recall everything they ever made before. It was a nightmare for them. They hired lawyers. There's specific consumer product safety lawyers. I can recommend one if anyone ever needs, but to fight it, as much money as they saved for not doing that $500 of testing, they probably spent 10 or 20 or 30 times as much. And then they're making different models and testing it over and over to see, is it consistently passing and what's the issue? And of course, at this point, the CPSC would not let them change the age grade. You can't just write any age grade you want. It has to be true. This is when that age would like to play with it, would enjoy the game, could understand the game. And if you thought it was 12 months plus, and now when you have trouble, you say 18 months plus, it's very unlikely you'll ever get away with that. Pre-knowledge is always helpful. Eventually, they got through it, but they sweated a lot. They spent a fortune. The cold medicine guy, he ended up needing to get special kind of packaging. I recently had someone, he came to me 3 years late. He had his stuff in a government warehouse for 3 years, and he could not figure out his labels. He just didn't know how to do it. I helped him. I wrote his labels for him. And then he had to get permission, and he hired special people, teams of people, to open every case and take out each box and put a label on it. And then finally, they let him. He needed a little bit of testing. We were able to work with the testing, which just labels, and we were able to get it out. If he had come to me 3 years earlier, it would have gone a lot faster for him. But it was from 2022 that this whole thing had happened, and we just found each other recently. But you can spend much more money than you save if you just won't do if you don't do it properly from the beginning.
And if you were to give brands a top tip, then at what stage should they involve someone like yourself?
It's a business decision, but definitely if you're running your business on a shoestring, and I know a lot of companies on e-commerce are running their business on a shoestring. So if there's no money around, definitely before you actually buy it or bring it to the United States or wherever you're bringing it, make sure it's good. I've heard too many people say, nobody's bothering me. Why should I worry about it? I just gave examples why you should worry about it, because some businesses, that's the end of the business. They can't handle that, especially if you're running on a shoestring. Even a smaller shipment can be tens of thousands of dollars, and it's all at risk. If you're a bigger company, we had somebody, he was doing $10 million of business. I don't know his profit margin. It doesn't have to be a great margin to make good money on $10 million of sales. And he was doing his compliance on back of an envelope. Oh, that really got it. A very haphazard. And thank God he didn't get sunk by it, but he suddenly realized, we brought it to his attention, if you mess up your compliance, you could lose everything. Your product goes down for a while, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of costs. You're not making any money while this is happening. And all your rankings on e-commerce, they're all disappearing. It doesn't, relative to how much money it was making, it's not a significant amount of money to spend on it. You can hire people to do the headache for you. Like they don't have the head for it. A lot of people in e-commerce are successful because they're great marketers or creative thinkers that come up with a new product, and they don't have a head for this stuff. And I understand that. I don't have a head for that. You can hire somebody they'll have the headache for you and they'll do it for you. But you're risking your whole business. It makes sense to at least contact someone in advance before manufacture. If you make medicine or medical devices, it needs approval before you can sell it. So of course, before you make it, you need approval. Approval can take a long time. If it's very new, you may have to do clinical trials to prove it. But even if it's a copy of known technology that's already approved, don't take it for granted. You can get approved, but just make sure you have all that in advance. The factory needs to be a GMP factory. If it's food or dietary, food also it needs to be a GMP factory, and food has special rules within GMP. That means that the factory has to have a quality system, which means a system, how they do everything, which ensures that it's done consistently and with proper quality and safety. If you're doing electronics, you don't necessarily have to have that. And if you don't have that before you start, like your odds of making it right and being allowed to sell it, even if you do make it right, are not so good. You need to make sure that's all in order. There could be communications with electronics. There's often communications issues. If someone makes a microwave, let's say, or a television, and someone walks by with a pacemaker in their heart, there are wavelengths that are shooting around all over the place. You don't want to be making trouble for his pacemaker. There's testing for this kind of stuff, and it's not necessarily very expensive. There's ways to test it to make sure that you're not interfering with other electronics, and particularly this very significant life-dependent electronics. At the very least, you want to make sure you're passing all your testing in advance. You want to make sure your labels are good. Your ingredients are good, depending on product. Labels aren't everything. Ingredients are in anything you eat or put all over you. So that you definitely want to make sure this is done in advance. I've run labs also, and I've had people who wait till they're caught by Amazon or somebody to do their testing. And most of the time we can work it out, but sometimes it just fails and needs a redesign. And now what do? You have maybe a container load of toys that are not safe. And what are you going to do with them? And if the government sees them first, and they're not going to let them go. If it's labels and you fight hard, you might get away with that. That's not an easy fight even. You would think, I'll just fix my labels. Yeah. But will they let you? You need to argue with them about that and prove to them that they can rely on you. It's very serious.
You need David in your emergency contact details. David, you need to be e-commerce people's best friends.
Yeah.
It's not only stress and headache, it's cash flow, it's cost of redoing labeling or whatever it might be, at incredible amounts of expense, isn't it? And
right. And then all the SEO rankings you lose. You spend so long getting near the top, and then something like this ruins everything. I have people call me panics constantly. This kind of stuff is happening. And it's just so much easier to do it right the first time. I have customers who sell in multiple places. It's almost always an Amazon issue, but then it's a real issue. They really just did it wrong. There are times when you did everything right and the testing is right and the test report's written right and all your paperwork's in order, and you still have a problem with Amazon. It will happen sometimes. And I solve those kind of problems also. The more things you do wrong, once they start looking, they'll notice other things. So the less things that are wrong, the less likely they're looking at you. It's not a hard rule. I find that a lot.
Thank you. So it draws us to the end of the podcast. I've got one final question, which is, if you could give one piece of advice to every business thinking about international expansion, what would it be?
I would say, I said this already, but I would say that don't take it lightly, even though, it's the one thing you maybe don't want to think about, but messing up your compliance can totally derail your business or significantly derail your business. And you shouldn't take it lightly. It is very serious. If you do have problems, I'll do my best to solve it as quick as possible with as least damage to you as possible. But really take this stuff seriously and hire out your headache. You don't have to have the headache yourself, but you should take care of it. And I guess part of that is it can be complicated, and it's worth it. It's probably worth it to have somebody who's done it before to make sure that you didn't miss something. There can be a lot of ins and outs. I think I mentioned at one point that in the United States, there are multiple agencies that can regulate one product, which I don't think it's like that in Europe, but you may just not be aware of that a certain agency even has anything to do with your product. There are multiple agencies that have something on it. Some are more likely to cause trouble for you, but they're all available to cause trouble for you. And you want to make sure that you're covered everywhere.
Is there one kind of category or type of product that you get to work with most because they're the most problematic?
Comes in waves, but I know pajamas and robes. Robes are considered sleepwear. We did have a guy who had very fancy robes, and they weren't for sleeping in. They were for wearing it at dinner or with guests around when you're more relaxed. But if it's considered sleepwear, there's extra flammability regulations in the United States. The reason for that is, I guess it's obvious, you're sleeping in your sleepwear. If, God forbid, clothing caught fire and you're awake, you have a little more time to do something about it. But if you're sleeping, you may not ever be aware of it. God forbid. So the testing is much more intense, which means more expensive. It's harder to pass after the expense because that's the whole point of it. They want to make sure it's really just ain't going to burn. Now, what a lot of companies do is they do something called tight-fitting sleepwear. Tight-fitting sleepwear means it's not as baggy on you. They have determined that's less likely to catch fire. I guess like your hands aren't going to drip into a candle or something because it doesn't hang low. You can be exempted from some of the flammability requirements, but it comes with excessive labeling requirements. Labels all over the place because they're warning people, hey, this stuff burns. It's tight fitting, and therefore you have to be a little more careful because we've exempted it. So many companies mess up the labels, and basically works out to people call me up and I'll just write all their labels for them. But I need certain information, but I'll write the labels. It's got to say this, got to say that, got to say that. And one guy paid a few dollars, and he said, I can figure this all out on the internet. I remember the conversation with him. And a few months later, he called me up. What do I do? I sold my tight-fitting sleepwear to such and such a retailer, and my labels were wrong. I was like, it wasn't shocking. And they said they won't release them. They're reporting him to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. It's really hard to get it right, and it's a lot of companies don't get it right. And robes, sleep robes, a robe that's considered sleepwear is never considered tight-fitting. Tight-fitting, they measure in 10 different places, how thick the arm is, how thick the weight for each size. And you can't do that on a robe. It's inherently loose-fitting. We just tie the belts looser, and it's looser. So yeah, they'll never have that exemption. They always need the stricter flammability regulations. We had others. Magnets is a big issue. Button batteries is the latest big issue. In America, it's called Reese's Law. It has different names in different countries, but batteries are toxic, and many toddlers have died from eating batteries. When the first time it happened, the doctors had no idea what happened. They're like, something weird's going on with this kid, and we don't even know what we're fighting. And now already, I think they're more in tune with it, but it's still damaging a lot of horrible chemicals in a battery. And a button battery is the size of a button, and it looks like candy. It falls on the floor. No one sees it. And so also tons of labeling regulations, and it's very hard for companies to get their labels right. I've written labels for companies. The regulations have like options. If it's this, write it this way. If it's that, write it that. And I had people just say, I don't know, is it like this or is it like that? And I was like, you know what? That's what I realized. I give them a questionnaire, and I was like, I'm going to write your labels for this product. If you have a different product, I have to write, it might be a little different. But if there's too many options, too hard for people to sort through it all.
Yeah,
and
they'll do that little project.
Right. Somewhere around June or July, anyone selling school supplies, they released the bot on all the school supplies listings. And all of a sudden, everyone's having a problem with that. Amazon will release a bot on some category, whether they actually did something wrong or the bot found some word that freaked them out. Everyone's clamoring to solve that problem.
Amazon, if it was straightforward, it would be boring, wouldn't it?
Variety is the spice of life.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Thank you so very much for your time and top tips and stories. And for everybody who's listening, any kind of like product safety compliance questions, concerns, David is your man. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma.